My name is Donna. I'm 32 years old, living in Portland, and I own a small residential HVAC maintenance company. The job isn't glamorous. No high-rise or office or designer suits, but it's something I built from the ground up after nearly a decade of tireless work. I'm proud of it, even if not everyone in my family feels the same. It happened this Thanksgiving, a day that should have been whole, but instead became the moment I realized my true place in the hearts of those I thought were closest. I had just finished a long maintenance job, leaving the client's house as the sky turned dusky. Driving home, I felt at ease. The business was closed for the holiday. All my employees had received their bonuses, and I had picked up a bottle of red wine from a high-end shop to bring to the family dinner. Ever since my dad passed away, everything's giving. My mom cooked a big feast, and everyone showed up. I had never missed a single year. My phone buzzed. It was my mother, Ellen. I answered, still smiling. "Hi, Mom. I'm on my way home. Do you want me to bring apple pie or mashed potatoes this year?" There was a strangely long silence on the other end. Then she spoke, her voice a little shaky. "Donna, there's something I want to tell you, and I hope you'll understand." I frowned. "What is it, Mom? I think maybe this year you shouldn't come to Thanksgiving." My foot nearly slipped off the gas pedal. "What? It's just that Mason, Brittany's boyfriend, is bringing his parents over. They work in law. Very traditional types. Brittany wants everything to feel a bit more formal." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my heart pounding. "You mean I'm not allowed to come? I'm not family." "That's not what I mean." "Donna." "Of course, you're family. It's just that Brittany feels you might give the wrong impression. What I mean is because I'm an HVAC tech, because I didn't go to an Ivy League school." I cut her off, my voice already trembling. "Donna, don't make this more difficult." She sighed, her voice softening in that way I'd grown too familiar with the tone she used when she was about to say something unforgivable, but still expected me to swallow it without complaint. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "Do you remember who paid Brittany's tuition? I paid for all 4 years while she was in school in New York. Never missed a deadline. I gave her a future I never had." Mom went silent. Then she said weakly, "It's just one evening, Donna. We can see each other another time. Maybe a brunch." I hung up. I didn't cry. I just sat in my car, hands still on the wheel, feeling hollow, as if someone had torn out a part of me I didn't even know I'd been holding on to. An hour later, while I was sitting quietly in my apartment, a text from my cousin Madison popped up. "I thought you should know," Brittany told her mom. "You embarrass her. She doesn't want her boyfriend's family knowing someone in her house works with their hands." I read that line over and over. My grip on the phone was so tight. My fingertips left marks on the screen. Brittany, the same sister who once called me her hero when I gave her her first laptop at 18. The same girl I walked 3 snowy blocks for just to get rent money to her on time. Now she was ashamed of me. And I knew tonight, when everyone was sitting around the dinner table toasting, laughing, no one would mention me. No one would save me a seat. No one would notice. I wasn't there because in their eyes, I never really was. I still remember the next morning, the early winter sun slipped through the kitchen window like nothing had happened. I sat alone with a cold cup of coffee, the phone lying silently on the wooden table. I should have been prepping a pie, picking out a dress, getting ready to laugh with my family like every other year. But this year, all I felt was empty. I scrolled through social media without thinking. Then, like a punch to the gut, I saw the photo, posted by none other than Brittany. She stood in the center of Mom's living room, wearing a bright red dress, hand in hand with Mason. The dining table behind them was perfectly set. Fresh flowers, lit candles. Everything flawless. The caption read, "A warm Thanksgiving with the ones who matter most." I wasn't in the picture. Not a word about me, not a question about where I was. Just as I put my coffee down, my phone buzzed again. It was Madison, my cousin. The only one in the family who still called me for reasons other than favors. "You okay?" Her first message I hadn't replied yet when the next one came. "I think you need to hear this even if it hurts. Brittany told everyone you shouldn't come because she doesn't want her boyfriend's family to know. She comes from a working class background. She said if Donna shows up, they'll think we live in a garage." They froze. I read it over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood. or that Madison was joking in some cruel way. But I knew Madison wasn't like that. And deep down, I knew it sounded exactly like something Brittany would say. This wasn't the first time she had acted distant about my work. I once visited her dorm in sophomore year, wearing my dusty work uniform after finishing a job nearby, and she quickly pulled me into a corner, whispering, "Can you change shirts? Everyone here is in law school. It just looks weird." I let it go. I always let it go. I thought she was just young and embarrassed. I thought she'd grow out of it and realize a person's worth isn't measured by the starch in their collar. But I was wrong. I'd been wrong from the start. I had paid Brittany's Columbia tuition since the moment she stepped onto campus. Each semester cost over $18,000. I worked overtime, skipped vacations, turned down personal days just to make sure she never had to worry about tuition books or housing. I never asked for a thank you. I didn't need Christmas cards. I just thought if I helped her build a good life, at the very least, I'd be welcome at the family table. But in Brittany's eyes, I wasn't someone to be introduced. I wasn't someone who mattered. I closed my phone. Heart-pounding anger, shame, heartbreak, disappointment all swirled inside me like a storm with no way out. I stepped outside, watching the cars pass under a gray sky. And I understood what hurt wasn't that I wasn't invited. It was being erased by someone I loved with everything I had. In that strange, quiet moment, I knew I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't keep living as the one who was always dismissed. I couldn't be the only one holding on to bonds that were one-sided. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and opened the folder labeled Brittany's Tuition Private. The line read, "Next payment due in 14 days, $1,740. I moved my cursor to remove payment method. A warning popped up. "Are you sure you want to remove your payment method? This action cannot be undone." I didn't hesitate. I clicked confirm. A soft click echoed as I closed the laptop, but inside me, it sounded like the latch of a door finally shutting for good. The next morning, when the clock struck 7 a.m., I was already seated at my desk, a steaming cup of tea next to my laptop, which was open to the Columbia University login page. I entered my email and password. As always, the message, "Welcome back." Dana popped up. The tuition payment section was clearly displayed. Spring term balance due $18,740. Payment due 14 days. I had stared at that message countless times, and every time I'd sigh, grab my wallet and pay it right away. But this time my fingers weren't shaky or hesitant. I moved the cursor to the button labeled Remove Payment Method. A small pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to remove your account information? This action cannot be undone." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then clicked confirm. A small ping sounded, and just like that, it was over. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone started vibrating. The first call was from Mom before I could pick up. Another call came in, this time from Brittany. Both went straight to voicemail. I knew they wouldn't stop. I switched my phone to silent and got back to work. By noon, I was checking the HVAC system at Quinn and Harris law offices when my phone lit up nonstop. A quick glance, 8 missed calls, 14 unread texts. I knew I should have ignored them. But then one message from Brittany made me pause. "What did you just do?" "The school said my tuition's unpaid. Your account disappeared. Call me back now." Right after that came a message from Mom. "Donna, you can't be this cruel to your sister. You know she has no one else but you." I stood frozen in the client's reception room. The clipboard in my hand suddenly cold. A chill ran down my spine. Not from the AEC, but from the realization that in Mom's eyes, I was just the only option to keep her daughter from failing. Not her daughter. Not someone who'd worked her hands raw for 10 years. Just a walking wallet. That afternoon as I drove home, Mom's 13th call came through. I sighed and answered. Her voice immediately burst through tense. "Donna, you can't just walk away like this. Do you know how panicked Brittany is right now?" I kept my hand steady on the wheel. Voice calm. "I know, and I think she should be panicking." "Don't you think this is too harsh?" Mom continued, voice cracking with anger. "She's in her final year. What if she gets kicked out?" I let out a short laugh. "Mom, Brittany's old enough to understand the consequences of her actions. She's an adult, not a child. I need to carry. You promised you'd help her until she graduated." I paused for a second. I promised to help my sister. But the Brittany you're defending today, that's not someone who sees me as family. I'm not obligated to keep enabling ingratitude. Mom went silent. Then, as always, she softened her tone, layering it with guilt. You're the only one in this family who can help. Are you really going to abandon your family? I bit my lip, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Family isn't made up of people who only call when they need a withdrawal. Family doesn't shut you out of dinner just because your job isn't refined enough. I'm not an endless ATM mom. A long sigh, then her usual closing line. You've changed. I smiled bitterly. No, Mom, I've just finally started living as myself. I ended the call that night. I lay in bed, staring at the white ceiling, letting the silence wrap around me. No more ringing phone, no desperate texts, no guilt trips. Then a soft ding, a new message. Donna, I can't believe you do this to me. I've lost everything. Hope you're happy with your decision. I stared at the message for a long time, didn't respond. Because if Brittany truly believed I destroyed her life with a single click, then maybe she never realized it was she who started destroying everything in the first place. I don't know what happened after Brittany's last message, because for the next 3 days, my phone stayed completely silent. No calls from Mom, no texts from distant relatives. Everything was quiet. And a year ago, I might have cried from the emptiness. But now the silence felt like a rare gift. No expectations, no blame. No more playing the role of the selfless sister. I was reviewing technical documents at the office when Madison called. Have you heard? Her voice came through hushed and urgent. Heard what I asked, though my gut already knew Brittany. She showed up at Jordan's house this morning. I frowned. Jordan, Brittany's boyfriend, number ex-boyfriend now, Madison said, her tone low and deliberate. I sat upright. What do you mean? Madison took a deep breath. Mason broke up with her. He moved out of the apartment this morning. Someone saw Brittany crying in Jordan's yard for nearly an hour. I stayed silent for the first time in weeks. I was genuinely shocked. You know why? Madison continued. Mason told his mom that Brittany lied about who paid her tuition. He thought her parents were covering all of Columbia's costs, when he found out it was you, her sister. He was speechless. A chill ran down my spine. Not from joy, not from vindication, but from the realization that Brittany hadn't just erased me from her life. She had replaced me with a version of reality where I didn't exist just to fit into a world she thought she deserved more. How long did she lie to Mason? I asked. Almost 2 years, Madison said hesitantly. Mason said he felt like he'd been pulled into a long play where the lead character was never real. That afternoon, I received an email from Columbia's student office. Please note the primary payment method has been removed from Brittany Calloway's student account. Her financial status is currently unresolved. Please update a valid payment method by January 10th to avoid withdrawal from the university. I didn't forward it, didn't call Mom, didn't inform Brittany. I just skimmed the message and closed my screen. But sure enough, Brittany reached out to Mason. They met that evening at a familiar cafe in the Belmont district. I wasn't there, but Madison knew someone who worked at the place, and word spread like wildfire. Mason was already there when she showed up 15 minutes late. Madison recounted, her voice a mix of pity and unease. She wore a silk dress, full makeup, like she was trying to salvage the last image of perfection. And I asked. Mason didn't let her say much. He asked her straight up, "Why didn't you tell me the truth about Dana?" I pictured the scene, Brittany's face going stiff, her hands twisting together under the table. She told him she was embarrassed, that she didn't want him to think she was taking advantage, that her family situation was complicated, and she just wanted to keep up a good image in front of Mason's parents. I wasn't surprised. That was the kind of language Brittany always used, subtle, evasive, shifting blame, while still sounding innocent. But Mason didn't buy it. Madison continued. He told her, if you're mature enough to build a future for yourself, you should be mature enough to be grateful to the one who gave you that opportunity. I stayed silent. My heart ached, though. I couldn't tell if it was for Brittany or because for the first time someone outside the family said what I never dared to ask for. Mason added one more thing. Madison finished. I can't love someone who's ashamed of their own family, because if today it's your sister, tomorrow, it might be me. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Brittany had lost her tuition. Now she had lost her relationship. And the saddest part was, she still didn't understand why everything was falling apart. 3 days after that last call with Madison, I received a second email from Columbia. This is your final notice. If tuition is not paid by the January 10th deadline, student Brittany Calloway will be automatically withdrawn from the spring semester enrollment. Please address this immediately to avoid disruption to academic progress. I read that line 3 times but felt nothing. Not anymore. I had given Brittany more chances than anyone ever had, and all she did was turn me into something to be hidden behind silk curtains. That night, Brittany called 6 times in a row. I didn't pick up. Her messages poured in. I know I messed up. I was just scared of being judged. You can't do this to me. I'll lose everything. You do not love me anymore. Were all those years just fake? If I get kicked out, my future is over. Dottie. I didn't reply. After the 10th call, I blocked her number. 2 days later, she used a different number to call again. When I blocked that too, the messages moved to email, Instagram, even LinkedIn. The last one read, "If you don't answer, I'll come find you." And sure enough, Brittany did the one thing no one thought she would ever dare to do. On Monday morning, while I was in a meeting with my tech team about a new HVAC contract for a coastal hotel chain, the glass door to the office flew open so hard the security chime went off. I looked up. Brittany stood in the doorway, hair messy, mascara streaked from crying, her heels caked in mud. "I need to talk to my sister," she shouted, freezing everyone in the room. I stood up, my gaze cold as steel. "This is a place of business, Brittany. You don't get to cause a scene here. You're ruining my life!" Brittany shrieked, her voice full of desperation. "You can't just cut me off like nothing happened before I could respond." Security was already moving toward her, firm voiced. "Ma'am, we need you to leave the building now. Don't touch me." Brittany snapped, her eyes wild. "I'm the sister of the woman who runs this place." I stepped forward, calm and steady. "You're the sister of the person who runs this place, not the one running it. You don't have the right to disrupt my work because you refuse to face the consequences of your own actions. You're abandoning me," she yelled one last time, but no one reacted. No sympathetic glances, no nods of agreement, just the cold silence and her heavy footsteps as security escorted her out. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. "Mom," I hesitated, then answered. "Donna, what happened this morning? Brittany called me, said she was kicked out of your office. She's humiliated." I said nothing, sipping my water slowly. "Do you know what it'll mean if she gets expelled?" Mom went on, her voice breaking. "I know," I answered firmly, "and I think she needs to learn how to take responsibility. Families don't turn their backs on each other like this," she snapped. "You're her sister." I set my glass down, my voice steady. I was her sister. But to her, I've only ever been a tool. When I stopped paying, I stopped being family. "LaDonna, I'm begging you." I cut her off. I didn't work myself to the bone for 10 years just to be labeled a shame. I took a deep breath. "You should call the bank or learn to say no like I did." I hung up. The next day, Aunt Carol called. Then Uncle Jeff. Even a high school friend I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade messaged me. "Donna, is it true your sister might get expelled? People are saying you went too far." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I was certain of one thing. I was no longer a walking wallet, and I had learned that love cannot exist where there is exploitation. Not anymore. In the weeks following the office incident, I expected to be dragged into a never-ending battle with my family, and it came just as I'd predicted. Late-night calls, relentless texts, all wrapped in those 2 words. Blood ties. "You're too cold. She's still your sister, Donna. People are saying you've changed. You don't care about family anymore." Words that in the past might have brought me to tears. But now I simply put the phone down on my desk, looked out the window at the pine trees swaying in the late-year wind, and let myself be quiet. No more defending. No more apologizing. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. One morning in mid-December, as I was reviewing ventilation plans for a new shopping center project, Madison texted, "Just saw your mom at the grocery store. She said Brittany dropped out and moved back home." Honestly, they both looked rough. I stopped typing. My eyes lingered on the message. She also said she still thinks it's your fault. I wasn't surprised. To my mom, accountability was always something that could be reassigned, and I was usually the one that got assigned to Brittany failing because she couldn't face reality. Irrelevant. What mattered was that I dared to walk away. But instead of feeling sad, I felt relief because while they were still stuck in that loop of blame and denial, I was starting a new chapter in my life with the money I used to spend on Brittany's tuition. I expanded my company, hired 2 certified technicians, upgraded to new carbon monoxide testing equipment, and even redesigned the office in a modern neutral-toned palette. I also accepted a 3-year maintenance contract with a chain of coffee shops in the Pearl District. 6 figures. Now I work not out of fear of lacking, but because I truly love what I do. No one makes me feel less than for not wearing a corporate name badge. No one asks, "So when are you switching to a real job?" No one sighs. When I say I run my own technical crew, and most importantly, no one treats me like I'm invisible. On Christmas Eve, I sat alone on the couch, my moss green sweater wrapped around a tired body. After a long day, outside the window, neighbors' lights blinked in and out, and the sound of church bells echoed faintly in the distance. I poured myself a glass of white wine, planning to watch a feel-good comedy before bed. Then my phone lit up. It was a message from Mom Donna. "Christmas just isn't the same without you. Everyone misses you. Call me." I don't know how long I stared at that message. Maybe just a few seconds. Or maybe it was a whole lifetime folded into a single moment. I thought of all the Christmases past. I was always the one who brought the little tree, who wrapped everyone's gifts, who paid for dinner with money I could have spent caring for myself. But no matter what I did, I was always not presentable enough around company. I took a deep breath and gently deleted the message. Not because I didn't miss them, not because I never loved my family, but because for the first time, I had learned to love myself more than people who never truly valued me. I don't expect Brittany to change. I don't expect my mother to apologize. I only hope that from now on, I can live a life where I don't need permission just to exist. A few weeks after Christmas, as Portland welcomed the first cold, damp rains of the new year, I received a handwritten letter from someone I least expected. My grandmother, Evelyn Calloway. She hadn't lived with our family in years. After Grandpa passed, she moved to a small house in the suburbs of Salem, nearly a 3-hour drive away. I only visited her a few times a year during the holidays, but she had always been the one person in the family who never judged me for my career or lifestyle. All she ever asked was that I show up with a smile and the same calloused hands that built everything I had. The letter was written neatly, her handwriting slanted like the gentle tone of her voice. "My dear Donna, I don't know exactly what's happened in the family lately, but I know this: when a woman like you finds the courage to set boundaries, many people will feel uncomfortable. Don't let that stop you. Who among them has ever sacrificed for you the way you have for them? I am proud of you, not because of the money you make or the contracts you sign, but because you have learned to protect your own heart." I read that letter 3 times amid all the blame and guilt. She was the only one who saw me fully, without needing an explanation. And I realized maybe she was the first person who made me believe that choosing myself isn't a betrayal. I used to believe that family was unbreakable, that if I gave enough, they'd eventually love me, accept me, be proud of me. But I was wrong, because no one is obligated to love you. If all they've ever learned is how to take and you are not obligated to sacrifice yourself just because someone shares your last name. I spent too many years living as though my worth was measured by how much I could give, every tuition payment, every expensive birthday gift, every vacation I canceled to work more hours. I used to think those were acts of love. But the truth is, love doesn't ask you to hide who you are. Love doesn't make you feel ashamed of the job that feeds you. It doesn't require you to step back just so someone else can shine. Someone expects you to do that. It's not love, it's control. Dressed up as family, I no longer feel guilty for staying silent when Mom texts. I no longer feel torn when relatives call me stubborn or cold. And I don't dream of Brittany showing up at my door with tears in her eyes, hugging me, saying she was wrong. I don't need that anymore. I've learned how to hold myself, stand firm in the storm of opinions, and to say clearly I wasn't born to be a backdrop in someone else's story. If you're in a situation like mine, where you give, and all you get back is silence, judgment, or indifference, here's what I want you to remember. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of courage. Choosing dignity over dysfunction doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it means you've grown. It means you finally know your worth. I don't know if Brittany will ever learn that lesson. I don't know if my mother will ever stop running from accountability, but I do know this. I will never go back to who I used to be. The one who quietly paid the bills but never got a seat at the table. The one who always did everything right but was still treated like a shame. And finally, I chose myself not to get revenge, but to finally live. Donna's story is a powerful reminder that family cannot survive without respect and recognition. In a world where people often judge by appearance or status, she found the strength to draw the line and choose herself not out of spite but from self-worth. She shows us that love doesn't mean blind sacrifice. Saying enough to being used is the first step to reclaiming your value and living a life that's free, worthy, and empowered. What do you think of Donna's decision? Was she right to set boundaries and put herself first? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real, and inspiring stories about family. Story 2. My name is Abby. I was 19 years old at the time, living in a small town near Sacramento, California. I once thought I was a lucky daughter, blessed with a complete family, at least in the eyes of our neighbors and relatives. But it turned out the only thing they truly cared about was the image we projected to the world. And I, in just one night, became the thorn that scratched through that polished surface. It all started with a video that spread online. A private video recorded during spring break the year before, when I was foolish enough to trust the person I called my boyfriend Dylan. I had firmly broken up with him after discovering his betrayal. I didn't know that Dylan still kept that video, and I never imagined he would use it for revenge by humiliating me in front of the entire town. The first message came early in the morning, before I was fully awake. A classmate sent it to me, along with the words, "Abby, are you okay?" Then came a flood of other messages, all filled with hidden meanings. When I finally opened my laptop, my face went pale. Images, laughter, my privacy torn apart and spreading like wildfire through dry grass. I could hardly breathe, but the worst part wasn't the stares and whispers outside. It was how my family reacted. The first one to find the video wasn't me. It was my sister Jenna. She sent it straight to my father, along with a chillingly brief line. "You need to do something before this ruins our family's reputation." When I got home that afternoon, everything had changed. The front door lock had been replaced. One of my old, worn-out bags lay abandoned on the porch. My mother Sharon stood behind the curtain. Her gaze as cold as if she had never given birth to me. Not a single question. "Are you okay?" Only heavy silence. The kind of silence that told me they had erased me from the family. My father Gregory wouldn't open the door when I pounded on it and called for him. He just stood inside, his voice sharp as it echoed out. "You brought this. Shame on yourself, Abby. We didn't raise a daughter to become a laughingstock." I froze. My chest ached as if a hand were squeezing it tight. I wanted to scream that I was the victim, that I was the one betrayed and hurt. But I knew it was pointless. Their minds were made up. I sat down on the porch steps, the sunset sliding down the roof, casting its light on that worn bag like a cool reminder of our severed ties. Inside the bag were a few old clothes, a pair of sneakers with worn soles, and a journal I used to hide under my pillow. That night, I snuck into the backyard, trying to climb through the window of my old room. The same window I used to sneak out of as a kid. The room was unchanged, only colder, emptier. I sat on the floor, leaning against the bed, and with trembling hands opened the journal. I began to write my words broken like my breathing. "I'm sorry for disappointing everyone. I don't know how to fix this. I just hope I stopped." My vision blurred. My hands shook. I looked at the page and realized it was meaningless. What was there to apologize for when I was the one who had been hurt? I tore out the page and set it on fire with my lighter. The small flame licked at the paper's edge, its faint light flickering against the walls of the room I used to call mine. I stood up, walked toward the window, and glanced back one last time. Night had fallen over the small town. The streetlights in the distance glimmering like lighthouses that I knew were no longer meant for me. I clutched my bag tightly and walked away without looking back. I wandered through the cold night of Sacramento, clutching that worn bag to my chest. The familiar city felt like a foreign land. Now, every street corner, every streetlight made me feel lost. That night, I slept in the car of an old friend, the only one who pitied me enough to give me shelter. But after just 3 days, his patience wore thin. "Abby, I don't want any trouble. You understand? Right?" His voice faltered, avoiding my eyes. I understood I had nothing left to hold on to. On the 4th day, I caught an interstate bus leaving town behind. I didn't know exactly where I was going, just far as possible. The old bus rattled down endless highways, leaving behind the place I once called home. I leaned my head against the window, my breath fogging the cold glass outside. The dark night swallowed the distant mountains, and I felt like it was swallowing me too. Denver greeted me with a bitterly cold winter night. I stepped off at the bus station, my thin coat. No match for the wind that cut through my skin like a blade. I had no one there, no place to stay. A spot beneath a bridge near the station became where I curled up for the night. That night, as I huddled beneath a thin blanket I found in a donation bin, a soft sob echoed through the dark. I lifted my head, straining to see a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, was all alone. Her face, dirty tears in her eyes as she looked around in panic. I stepped out from my hiding spot, slowly approaching her, my voice gentle. "Sweetie, where's your mom? Why are you here alone?" She trembled, said nothing, clutching a torn teddy bear. I knelt down and held out my hand. "I'll help you find your mom, okay?" After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I walked with her down to the empty street, asking other homeless folks along the way, and finally found her mom, a young woman frantic running along the sidewalk, searching for her child. The moment they embraced, I stepped back, my throat tight. I had saved someone, even just a little. And in that moment, I reminded myself I couldn't give up. The next morning, I chopped off my long hair in the bathroom of a gas station. Locks of hair fell onto the cold tile floor like pieces of the old Abbey. I stared into the mirror, seeing a face so unfamiliar that I froze. I went to a community center and signed up with a new name, Abigail, for keeping just the first letter of my old last name, enough to remind myself never to forget the bitter lesson. The days that followed were a stretch of time where I struggled to survive. I applied to work as a waitress at a small diner tucked away in an old residential neighborhood. My hands grew used to the weight of heavy plates, to the constant rush of orders, to the forced smile I wore as I accepted meager tips at noon. I took on cleaning work at a small clinic. The smell of antiseptic clung to my clothes, following me all the way back to the cheap rented room in a crumbling building with peeling walls. At night, I hunched over an old keyboard, entering data for a logistics company whose office location I didn't even know. Each night as the city fell asleep, I sat on my worn bed, flipping through scraps of paper where I had written my goals. Survive. Learn. Become someone they never imagined. Once, while cleaning the clinic, I found a thin book on immigration law. Someone had left behind. I brought it home, devouring every page like a thirsty person finding water. The more I read, the more it felt like I had opened a new door. I began to realize that the law, the thing that once made me feel trapped, could also be what helped me save myself. I was no longer the Abby I used to be. I became invisible in this big city. But step by step, I knew I was quietly redrawing my life. One early winter evening, as I had just finished my cleaning shift at the clinic, cold wind howled through the cracks in the doors, cutting into my skin like thin blades. I walked briskly down the empty street toward my shabby rented room. Suddenly, a hurried voice called out from a small alley across the street. "Please don't take my son! Please!" I stopped in the dim light under the street lamp. I saw a small woman, her hands trembling as she clutched a boy about 6 years old. In front of her were 2 men in plain clothes, one of them holding a stack of papers, his voice tense. "Sign this. The form's valid. If not, they'll come. Take both of you tomorrow." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. I wasn't anyone important. But in that moment, I couldn't walk away. "What's going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible. One man glared at me, annoyed. "None of your business. Leave!" But the woman looked at me with pleading eyes that I couldn't ignore. I reached for the stack of papers and quickly scanned them. There were clunky legal terms, but I realized this was a voluntary deportation consent form, not any valid order. I took a deep breath. "You don't have to sign this. It's not mandatory. And if you two don't leave, I'll call the police." The two men were speechless. One of them cursed, then dragged his partner away. The woman burst into tears, hugging her son tightly. Thank you. I just nodded, my heart still shaking with fear. But I knew I had done the right thing. 3 days later, while I was wiping down chairs in the waiting room, a man knocked on the clinic door. He wore a long gray coat, holding a folder. "Are you Abigail?" He smiled, handing me a business card. "I'm Marcus Ellis, director of a nonprofit supporting immigrant communities, Liberty Bridge. We heard about how you helped that mother avoid signing deportation papers. We're looking for someone to assist with paperwork. Are you interested?" I hesitated, unsure what to say, but he continued. "No experience required. We just need someone with a conscience at the job. Started with small tasks, making coffee, photocopying files, delivering documents to court. I didn't complain. Every day I learned a little more. By day I ran errands. By night. I sat in my old room watching immigration law lectures on my laptop, downloading materials to read. Each time I saw a family smile as they received a temporary residence permit, warmth spread through me. I was no longer invisible in the crowded streets. I was beginning to rebuild myself from pieces I once thought were shattered. One late afternoon, as I was organizing files, Marcus walked in. "Abby, a local paper, wants to interview you. They heard about how you helped Maria and her son." I froze. My heart clenched. "No, I don't want attention. I just want to help." Marcus looked at me with kind eyes. "I understand. When you're ready, just say the word." I breathed a sigh of relief. Time passed. From running errands, I moved on to compiling documents, then drafting outlines for community workshops. Every night, I kept studying. I enrolled in an online short course on law, quietly building my knowledge. Then one day, as I stood giving a presentation at a small community center workshop, looking into attentive faces, I realized I couldn't keep hiding. I was no longer the girl running away. And when the Denver Chronicle approached me again, I nodded, but I only allowed them to write. Community advocate. Since the day I became an immigration policy advisor for the city of Denver, my life took a completely new path. The meeting rooms that once intimidated me became places where I spoke up with confidence. I became the one at the negotiating table, making proposals, helping to shape policies. Every meeting, every report I wrote was an effort to prove that someone once rejected could still do good. I learned to use precise words to present data to defend my arguments. At night, I stayed up late under the desk lamp, poring over immigration law, scribbling notes in the margins of books and documents. I clearly remember one snowy morning when my phone rang insistently. It was a call from a colleague reporting that a Honduran family we had once helped was facing an improper deportation order. I didn't even grab my coat. I rushed straight to the shelter. The little girl in that family was about 9 years old when she heard that they could stay while their case was reviewed. She burst into tears, ran up, and hugged me tight. "You're my hero!" I bent down and hugged her. Warmth filled me despite the bitter cold of that morning, and I knew I was on the right path. News about me started appearing in local papers. At first, I kept refusing to appear on camera. I was afraid my face would be recognized, that my past would be brought up. But then I realized if I kept hiding, my voice would never be loud enough to protect those who needed it. I agreed to interviews, but insisted they only print. Abby, our immigration policy advisor. No portraits, no sensational headlines. Gradually, I stopped fearing the camera lens. I appeared at hearings, answered interviews, and spoke at symposiums on immigration and human rights. I didn't talk about myself. I spoke about the people who quietly contributed to building the community, about the children who only dreamed of going to school without fearing separation from their families. One autumn day, Marcus, the man who had once given me my first chance, met me at a small cafe near City Hall. He looked at me with that rare look of unwavering trust. "Abby, you've done more than we ever expected. It's time for you to take one more step. You should run for office." I felt rooted to the spot. "Run for office, Marcus." "I'm not a politician." He smiled and shook his head. "You don't have to be a politician. You just need to be yourself, and you can make real change." After many sleepless nights, I decided to run for governor of Colorado. I knew I wasn't wealthy. I had no powerful backers. But I had one thing: the trust of those I had helped. My campaign was simple. No frills, no empty promises. On the posters, I included just one line: "Let actions speak louder than words." I went to every town, every neighborhood, shook every hand, listened to their stories. I didn't talk about my past. I only spoke about the future we could build together. On election night, the small hall where I chose to gather wasn't grand. It was just a community center in Denver with warm yellow lights and old wooden chairs. The results appeared. Ever governor of Colorado. Applause roared like waves. I stepped up to the podium, heart full of gratitude. I looked down at the crowd, the faces that had journeyed with me, and silently vowed this path wasn't just for me, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed. I was sitting in my office, the afternoon light streaming through the wide glass window, when my assistant's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Abby, you should see this on the large screen mounted in the corner of the room." The news ticker scrolled. "Savannah, our Texas state prosecutor, faces allegations of evidence tampering." Is that still Savannah? My sister by blood, the one who had secretly sent my private video to our father, pushing me into a pit of despair. And now she was facing the very legal storm I had once trembled to avoid. Details appeared. She was accused of falsifying evidence in an immigration case where a single mother was at risk of unlawful deportation. The media called it Texas's political earthquake. I stared at the screen, feeling no surge of hatred, only as if fate was mocking us with a strange loop. 3 days later, I appeared at Savannah's preliminary hearing in Austin. I came quietly without announcement. I bought a commercial ticket, traveled alone, wore a long gray coat and dark sunglasses. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and onlookers. I quietly chose a seat in the last row, hidden behind a large pillar, but nothing could hide my presence. Once a familiar gaze met mine, the judge entered, her eyes sweeping the room before pausing. She froze briefly, adjusted her glasses, and frowned. "Excuse me, is that Governor Abier?" The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Heads turned, cameras and phones were raised. Savannah spun around, eyes wide in shock, her lips moving but no words coming out in the front row. My parents sat like statues. My father, Gregory, looked at me as if he had seen a ghost from the past. My mother, Sharon, clutched her worn rosary tight, her eyes filled with tears. I sat up straight, neither nodding nor bowing. I wasn't there to save nor to judge. I only came to witness. Just hours later, social media was flooded with headlines. Governor Abier makes surprise appearance at sister's trial. A woman once abandoned by family now silently bears witness to the truth. And then the real storm hit. A tabloid blog dug up the old video I thought had long been forgotten. They posted a blurry screenshot from the clip. Unmistakable. Despite the haze, I sat in my office, the screen flashing with messages from the communications team. An assistant called voice panicked. "We need a response immediately. We can sue. We can demand a takedown. Do you want to issue a statement?" I shook my head. "No. Let them look. I'm not afraid anymore." My phone rang. The caller? My father. I hesitated, then answered. His voice was still as cold as in the old days. "Are you using the family to polish your image? That's enough." I closed my eyes for a moment, then replied. Voice calm. "I've carried this name longer than the time you ever stood up for me. If you don't feel ashamed, I have no reason left to bear it." The long beep echoed as he hung up. At night, I looked out the window at Austin's city lights. My reflection on the glass was no longer the frightened girl who once ran away. I only saw a woman facing the past in peace below. News crews kept their cameras ready, waiting for me to appear. But I didn't need the lens to prove anything. I had already let my actions speak. A message from my mother appeared on my phone screen one evening after I had finished a meeting with the Legislative Council. "Come home for dinner with the family. We need to talk. Please." I stared at the words, my finger hovering over the screen. After more than 10 years, it was the first time she had reached out to me like that. Before I could respond, another message arrived from my father. "Abby, you are the family a conversation. Come." I knew they weren't calling me back out of affection. I knew exactly why. Savannah. And this time they had no choice but to turn to the daughter. They had once pushed out the door on Friday night. I returned to the house in the suburbs of Austin, the place that was once a home, but in my memory was only a place of coldness. The house was just as it had been, the white fence freshly painted. The garden neatly trimmed, everything tidy, as if that order could somehow cover up all the cracks inside. My mother opened the door, her face showing clear exhaustion, dark circles beneath her eyes from sleepless nights. She tried to force a weak smile. "Abby, you're home!" My father stood behind her, adjusting his tie, looking more like he was preparing for a negotiation than for a family dinner. Savannah was already at the dining table, visibly thinner. Her eyes lowered as she saw me enter. Dinner had been carefully prepared. A long table covered with a white cloth, porcelain plates, and crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier. Light. The scent of enchiladas and cornbread filled the room, but no one touched their food. No one was in the mood to enjoy it. My eyes happened to stop at the wall across from me. A painting hung neatly there, the one I had painted at 16, a Texas country landscape with a brilliant evening sky. But the bottom right corner, where I had once signed my name in clumsy handwriting, had been covered with a small piece of cream-colored fabric, so skillfully placed that anyone who didn't know would think it was part of the design. I stared at it for a long time. My heart tightened, not with anger, but with a deep sadness. My father began. "Abby, we don't need to drag this out. You know why you're here tonight. Savannah made a mistake, but she's still your sister. Could you use your voice, say something to the prosecution, or at least help her get a chance to explain?" My mother grabbed my hand, her eyes pleading. "Sweetheart, please. You're the family's only hope right now. Just one word from you." Savannah looked up, her lips trembling. "Abby, I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but I have no one else." I set down my knife and fork, the sound of metal on porcelain ringing out in the silent room. I looked at each of them in turn, my voice slow and clear. "If tonight I weren't Governor Abby, would you still see me as family?" The table fell silent. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking with each beat. I got to my feet, gently sliding the chair back. It creaked softly, like the house itself was sighing. I took in the painting one last time and offered a faint smile. I kept there to remind myself where I once fell. But I rebuilt this life without needing any of you. My mother burst into tears, her voice breaking. "They please don't leave us now." I turned away. Stepping out of that house, the night wind swept through the front yard. The scent of freshly cut grass drifting to my nose, reminding me that sometimes freedom is simply letting go of what once held us down. The car door closed, shutting out the voices calling from the house behind me. I started the engine, glancing in the rearview mirror. That house looked so small in the dark night, just like the weight of the past no longer had any hold on me, and I drove away without looking back. After leaving my parents' old house that night, what I carried with me was a single resolve to do something so that people like me would no longer be forced into silence by threats from their own family. The next morning, I held an emergency meeting with my policy advisory team in that modest room filled with papers and drafts. I spoke, my voice firm. "We will not let silence be the condition for love or respect. I want a bill. No, 2 bills to protect the voices of those who have been bound by family in the past." And so the Justice Witness Protection Bill and the Public Kinship Act were born. Drafted in the sleepless nights that followed 3 weeks later at a press conference in the Colorado State Capitol, I stepped up to the podium. No banners, no flashy slogans. I began. "For years, we've seen people threatened, slandered, and retaliated against by their own families for speaking out. I used to think this was just my personal story, but it's not. This is the pain of far too many, and today we will not let it continue." I introduced 2 bills before the press, lawmaker, and community representatives. The Justice Witness Protection Bill would criminalize acts of using family ties to threaten, coerce, or slander whistleblowers. The Public Kinship Act would allow public servants, officials, and those in public service to report family ties that could cause conflicts of interest without fear of being labeled as betraying their family. Reporters fired off questions when asked, "Aren't you afraid people will say you're turning a personal issue into politics?" I smiled and answered firmly, "I don't write laws for me. I write them for those who've had to choose between the truth and survival." News spread across newspapers everywhere, from local papers to national TV channels. The name Abir was mentioned, but this time not tied to any scandal or unearthed past, but to a bold political move. Public debate ignited. Some gave full support. Some were skeptical. On social media, thousands shared stories of being threatened by family, of being forced into silence in the name of family. My office received hundreds of letters and emails from all over the United States. One letter I still keep by my desk, handwritten on yellowing paper. Governor Abby, I'm Harold Bennett, someone who opposed you when you ran for office. I once thought you were destroying family values, but today, thanks to your bill, my daughter, who spoke out against her ex-husband's wrongdoing, is protected by the law. I was wrong. Thank you for doing what people like me never had the courage to do. I read that letter over and over. Each time I believed more deeply that the path I chose, though lonely, was the right one. The state legislature began reviewing the two bills. Hearings stretched on. Debates grew tense. I was present at every session, not avoiding anything. I shared real stories, cited words from victims who had written to me, and even spoke of my own story. But without bitterness, only truth. One afternoon, after a hearing, as I left the Capitol building, a middle-aged man approached me. He wore a security uniform, holding his cap in hand. "Thank you, Governor. My daughter was once too scared to speak up about her husband's abuse. Now she's stronger because of what you've done." I gripped his hand tightly, saying nothing more, but feeling a strange peace well up inside. On the day the bill passed the State House, I stood looking out the window, seeing the sky outside, unusually clear. I knew this was just the beginning, but at least I had laid the first stone in building a wall to protect people like me. That late afternoon, my office was quieter than usual. Outside the window, the soft autumn sunlight bathed the rooftops of Denver, casting a golden hue over the familiar street corner. I was reviewing the draft amendment for the Public Kinship Act when my assistant knocked softly, her voice low. "Governor, someone's here. No appointment. Savannah, she says she just wants to see you privately." I looked up, my finger pausing on the file. A brief silence. Then I nodded. "Send her in." The door opened. Savannah walked in no longer. The sharp prosecutor from the courtroom before me was a woman with a pale face, dark circles under her eyes, and an exhausted look. She wore an old sweater, her hair hastily tied back, her hands twisting together nonstop. She quietly took the seat across from me, drew a deep breath, and spoke. "Ever. I don't know where to start, but I want to speak from my heart." I didn't answer, just waited quietly. Savannah looked up at me, her voice breaking. "I used to be jealous of you. Jealous of the freedom you had that I didn't dare claim. Jealous that you dared to live honestly. So when I had the chance to push you away, I didn't hesitate. Now when I look back, I was the one who was truly lost." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm not asking you to save me. I know I don't deserve that. I want you to know that this time I truly regret it." I sat there looking at Savannah. No hatred left in me. What needed to be said, I had said long ago. I simply said softly, "You couldn't destroy me, Savannah. You just forgot I existed. And when someone is forgotten long enough, they learn how not to be forgotten anymore." She lowered her head, saying nothing more. When Savannah stood and left, I didn't see her out. There was no need for forced hugs or belated goodbyes between us. A week later, I attended a community gathering at a small activity center in the southern part of Denver. No cameras, no journalists, no grand banners. Just rows of neatly arranged plastic chairs. A long table covered with a simple white cloth, and about 40 local residents. I wore a light blue shirt, plain jeans, my hair tied back neatly. I rolled up my sleeves, helped set up chairs, poured water, arranged snacks on plates. A boy about 10 years old ran past, almost knocking over a water jug. I gently steadied his hand and smiled. "It's okay, kiddo. No one called me governor." No one looked at me with admiration or curiosity. I liked that quietness. When the gathering began, I sat among the crowd listening as people shared about the community's issues: housing, education, healthcare. At the end, as everyone slowly made their way out, I saw my father Gregory standing at the back of the room among the crowd, holding an old hat, his face older than I remembered. He wasn't dressed in a fine suit like always, just a dark, faded shirt. He waited until everyone had left before stepping closer, his voice low. "I didn't understand you before. I thought you were just a stubborn daughter, ruining the family's name. But today, seeing you sit there doing what I never dared to do, I get it now. You've done what I never had the courage to do." My eyes met his, and I felt a strange peace. No resentment, no sorrow. I simply replied softly, "I just did what I believed was right." He said nothing more. We stood there for a brief moment, then he turned away, his slow steps, the walk of a man weary of himself. A light rain began to fall as I stepped outside. I lifted my head, letting the rain soak my hair and shirt. No longer did I feel like the child who once huddled under the eaves. What remained was a woman who had learned to stand tall without needing attention or titles, just herself. And I knew that was the greatest victory. My story wasn't a journey to seek forgiveness from others, but a journey to forgive myself and stand steady on my own 2 feet. I had learned to let go of the expectations of those who once turned their backs, to focus on building something more meaningful, a life that is honest, useful, and doesn't need validation to feel worthy. Now looking back, I know I am no longer bound by the past. I don't need to be seen to know that I am doing right and living right. What do you think about Abby's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to catch more meaningful stories about life, family, and resilience.